A comprehensive history of gays from antiquity to modern day. Introduction. The history of gays is a rich and complex narrative that weaves through the fabric of human civilization. This history is marked by periods of acceptance and tolerance, as well as intense persecution and discrimination. Understanding the history of gays requires a deep dive into various cultures, legal systems, social attitudes, and significant movements that have shaped the experiences of gay individuals. This comprehensive exploration will cover key periods and milestones in the history of gays, providing a detailed account that spans thousands of years. Ancient civilizations. Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt. The earliest records of homosexual relationships date back to ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt. The Code of Hammurabi circa 1754 BCE mentions penalties for homosexual acts, indicating that such behavior existed but was subject to regulation. Egyptian culture. In ancient Egypt, depictions of same-sex relationships were relatively common. The story of Horus and Set is a mythological narrative that includes themes of homosexuality, suggesting that such relationships were part of the cultural fabric. Classical Greece. Social structure. Homosexual relationships, particularly between adult men and younger males, pederasty, were socially accepted in ancient Greece. These relationships often had educational and mentorship components. Notable figures. Prominent figures like Socrates, Plato, and Alexander the Great were known to have engaged in homosexual relationships. Plato's Symposium explores various aspects of love, including same-sex love. Gender and love. The Greeks did not define sexual orientation in the same way as modern society. Relationships were more about the roles individuals played rather than the gender of their partners. Roman Empire. Legal and social norms. The Roman Empire had a more complex view of homosexuality. While relationships between men were common, the emphasis was often on power dynamics and social status rather than gender. Emperors and influences. Several Roman emperors, such as Hadrian and Nero, were known for their homosexual relationships. Hadrian's love for Antinous was widely celebrated, and Antinous was deified after his death. Shift in attitudes. Over time, attitudes towards homosexuality in Rome shifted, particularly with the rise of Christianity, which brought about more stringent moral codes. Medieval period. Christian influence. Early Christian teachings. The spread of Christianity significantly impacted views on homosexuality. Early Christian texts and church fathers condemned homosexual acts, framing them as sinful and unnatural. Medieval laws. Throughout the medieval period, laws against sodomy became more severe. In many parts of Europe, those found guilty of homosexual acts faced harsh punishments, including execution. Islamic world. Cultural context. In contrast to Europe, the Islamic world had a more nuanced view of homosexuality. While Islamic law condemned homosexual acts, there was also a rich tradition of homoerotic poetry and literature. Historical figures. Notable historical figures such as the poet Abu Nuwas celebrated same-sex love in their works, reflecting a complex cultural landscape. East Asia. China and Japan. Homosexuality in ancient China and Japan was relatively accepted in various periods. In China, relationships between men were documented in literature and historical records. In Japan, the samurai tradition included male-male relationships known as shudo. Renaissance and Enlightenment. Renaissance Europe. Cultural revival. The Renaissance brought a revival of interest in classical antiquity, including more open discussions of same-sex relationships. Figures like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo are often speculated to have had homosexual relationships. Art and literature. Art and literature from this period sometimes subtly reflected homosexual themes, despite the prevailing moral and legal restrictions. Enlightenment. Changing views, the Enlightenment era began to challenge traditional views on sexuality. Intellectuals like Voltaire and Rousseau discussed the nature of human sexuality, although homosexuality was still largely stigmatized. Legal reforms. Some regions in Europe started to see early legal reforms. For example, in 1791, France became one of the first countries to decriminalize homosexual acts with the adoption of the Napoleonic Code. 19th century. 19th century. Industrial Revolution. Urbanization. The Industrial Revolution brought significant social changes, including the growth of urban centers. This urbanization created new opportunities for homosexual subcultures to develop. Scientific study. The late 19th century saw the beginning of scientific study into sexuality. Pioneers like Karl Heinrich Ulrichs and Magnus Hirschfeld began to advocate for homosexual rights and greater understanding. Legal and social backlash. Criminalization. Despite some progress, many countries strengthened their laws against homosexuality. In the UK, the Labouchere Amendment of 1885 criminalized gross indecency, leading to the persecution of figures like Oscar Wilde. Psychiatric pathologization. Homosexuality began to be viewed as a psychological disorder, leading to attempts to cure individuals through various means, including institutionalization and medical interventions. Early 20th century. World wars and social change. World War I and the World Wars brought about significant social upheaval. In some cases, the breakdown of traditional social structures allowed for greater freedom for homosexual individuals. Gay subcultures. Between the wars, cities like Berlin became centers of vibrant gay subcultures with flourishing nightlife and cultural scenes. Homophile movement. Early activism. The 1950s and 1960s saw the emergence of the homophile movement, with organizations like the Mattachine Society and the Daughters of Bilitis advocating for homosexual rights. Publications and advocacy. Publications like One Magazine provided a platform for homosexual voices, challenging the prevailing social stigmas. Late 20th century. Stonewall and the gay liberation movement. Stonewall riots. The Stonewall riots of 1969 in New York City marked a turning point in the gay rights movement. The riots sparked a wave of activism and the formation of new organizations dedicated to LGBT rights. Gay liberation. The 1970s saw the rise of the gay liberation movement, which sought not just legal reforms but also social acceptance and cultural recognition. Pride marches and demonstrations became key features of this period. AIDS crisis. Impact of AIDS. The AIDS crisis of the 1980s and 1990s had a profound impact on the gay community. The epidemic led to significant loss of life, but also galvanized activism and advocacy for medical research and social support. Political response. The response to the AIDS crisis varied, with some governments initially slow to act. Activist groups like ACT UP emerged to demand action and accountability. Legal and social progress. Decriminalization and legal recognition. The late 20th century saw significant progress in the legal recognition of gay rights. Many countries decriminalized homosexual acts, and some began to recognize same-sex relationships and provide protections against discrimination. Cultural visibility. Increased visibility in media and popular culture helped to change social attitudes towards homosexuality. Public figures coming out and gay characters in films and television played crucial roles in this shift. 21st century. Marriage equality. Global movement. The push for marriage equality became a central focus of the gay rights movement in the 21st century. Countries like the Netherlands, Canada, and Spain were early adopters of same-sex marriage laws. Landmark decisions in the United States. The Supreme Court's decision in Obergefell v. Hodges 2015 legalized same-sex marriage nationwide, marking a significant milestone. Continued challenges. Global disparities, despite progress, significant challenges remain. In many parts of the world, homosexuality is still criminalized and LGBTQ individuals face severe persecution. Intersectionality. The modern gay rights movement increasingly recognizes the importance of intersectionality, addressing issues at the intersections of race, gender, and sexuality, cultural and social shifts. Media and representation of gay individuals in media continues to grow with more diverse and complex portrayals. This visibility helps to foster greater acceptance and understanding. Youth and identity. Younger generations are increasingly embracing diverse sexual identities and challenging traditional norms. This shift is reflected in changing social attitudes and greater inclusivity. Conclusion. The history of gays is a testament to the resilience and perseverance of individuals who have fought for their rights and dignity across centuries. From ancient civilizations to modern-day movements, this history is marked by both struggles and triumphs. As society continues to evolve, understanding this history is crucial in fostering a more inclusive and accepting world. The journey of gay individuals is far from over, and ongoing efforts are needed to ensure equality and justice for all.